Hello, my name is Lisa. I'm the host of the Pretend It's a Plan Knitting podcast, and I wanted to take a moment and try this new setup and show you how I tink back yarn and tink back mistakes. And this works beautifully if you have, think of your bigger projects like shawls, scarves, any sweaters, I guess socks, hats, really anything where you have long stretches of the same stitch that you may have made a mistake on and you need to go back several rows. If you have to tink back 2, 3, maybe even 10 stitches, you might just want to do it the typical standard way. But this I have found really helpful to get through a lot of stitches in a short amount of time. So this is our sample knitting, and I'm using bigger needles than I would normally use just so I can kind of show you the stitch definition here. So let's go ahead and get started. So if, let's say I'm getting through my knitting, I'm at a point I realized, oh no, I should have done something different with this row for whatever reason, and I have to tink back. Tink is knitting backwards. The standard way of doing this, I'd wind my yarn around my finger, I'd tension it, I'd put it in through the stitch, pop that stitch off of there, put it in, pop that stitch off, and then after about 2 or 3 stitches, maybe 4, just depending on the yarn, I'd have to wind it again. And then I'd do a couple more, and then I'd have to tink back again. To me, that was really time consuming and it was really hard on my hands. So let me go back forward. I kind of think of knitting as a river. You know, your working yarn is like a river. It's supposed to go a certain way. You know, the way that it's knitting, it just flows beautifully. However, when you start tinking back, it changes course, it's flowing backwards. That yarn, you know, it's really hard to kind of tension the other way. So here's my solution. Now I'm going to stick this in here. Oh, let's see if I can get this to work. So if we were to tink back this knit stitch, I'd take my left needle, put it in from left to right in that bottom parent loop, I guess you could call that. So in that bottom loop, and then we bring the yarn off our right needle and kind of, that's our stitch. Okay, so our old stitch is back on here and we keep going back. So let me show that one more time. Okay, now my method, what I figured out we could do. Okay, so let's put that stitch back in there. I'm gonna turn this back around. I know this is going to be weird and it's really going to challenge your knitting sensibilities here, but trust me on this one, people. So I've got my yarn in the front. Let's kind of look at how our stitch is made up. I'm going to stretch that guy out. So we haven't popped off our old stitch yet, but notice that our needle, which is now our needle in our right hand, comes in from right side to left side, and our yarn is hanging out in front. So I'm just going to pop that off and I'm going to repeat it. Now, your body and your muscle memory is going to want to grab onto this yarn and tension it up and hold it. Trust me, people, you have to let it go. Just say ta-ta for now. And then we're going to come back in and we're going to do the same thing with our next stitch. We're going to come in from right side to left with our right needle and we're going to pop that stitch off the needle. We're going to come in from right to left and we're going to grab that stitch below. Now, this is where, depending on what yarn, what needles you're using, you may have a slightly different technique to kind of take care of this. But I find it kind of easy for this type of yarn. Find that opening from the old stitch and just kind of scoop the stitch out of here. Almost like you're slipping stitches. Oh my goodness, people, look how fast this is. How many stitches am I popping off? So once you figure out, you know, where to go into the stitch, you can fly. Imagine all those rows of a sweater where you forgot to put a striping in 2 inches below. Think how fast you can get through that sweater. So now this, I think, is the fun part. So, okay, I've taken off quite a good number of stitches here. So this is the fun part, and I'm gonna set this down on the table here so I can show you. Now we've got our yarn. I told you just to let it go and leave it for later. It's now later, and look what we get to do. Ooh, they come out, and our stitches are on our needles. They're lined up in the right order. I mean, the right direction. How easy was that? to tink back. So that first stitch, it's going to be a little bit of a doozy till you get that yarn kind of worked in the right direction. Oh my goodness, was that not fun? All right, I'm going to show you something else because I've made plenty of mistakes doing this. I want people to learn from my mistakes. So I've made the mistakes for you so you don't have to later make the mistakes. Oh, these end stitches are always so picky. Okay, so there we go. So let me show you a couple things here. Whoops, I got a goofball over there. All right, so a couple things when you're going in and tinking back the yarn. Okay, so let me flip over. Let's say we have to tink back this row. You know, normally we'd start this way and we'd go back. And if it helps you to get started, go ahead and do a couple just so you can see the direction. All right, I'm gonna flip this over and I'm gonna make a couple mistakes here for you just to kind of show you what would happen if you're not paying attention. Whoops, that yarn's supposed to stay over in front. That's one thing. If you're tinking back a knit row, you want the yarn between you and the work. So the yarn should be facing the front. Not necessarily the front of your work, but just what you're currently working on. The yarn needs to be facing in between you and the project. Let me say that. So let me go ahead and pop off one of these. Now, you might think it's, oh, why can't you just go in this way? Because it's certainly a lot easier to grab that stitch if you kind of go in, you know, up almost from like a left to right movement. Well, let me show you what will happen. Again, I've made the mistakes for you people, so you don't have to. Let me pop that yarn back out there. When we go to knit these stitches, if you notice, our stitches are going to be on there backwards. So if we wanted, you know, our left leg is kind of hanging over in the front instead of the right leg. Now, you could just knit them, and I guess depending on the project, you know, it might be okay if you knit it. But new knitters especially, this is something I had a terrible problem with. I was getting my stitches all twisted, and I don't know if you guys can see that or not. But that stitch, it's actually got a little twist, and we don't want to put it there. So one way, again, I make a lot of mistakes and end up twisting my stitches when I pull back my knitting. So I could just flip it on the needle and it comes out the right way. I could knit it through the back loop if I wanted to orient it the correct way, but save time, save hassle if you just remember to pick up your knit stitches from right to left, and that's how you're gonna wanna orient them on your stitches. Okay, how cool is that? All right, let me show you a couple other things that I've picked up. Again, very important that you have your yarn facing the correct way. So if you're doing a knit stitch, you want that yarn in between you and your project. Otherwise, let me get this guy out of the way. I'll show you what will happen. See, again, people, I made the mistakes for you, so you don't have to. Learn from my mistakes. All right, now this, I know it's gonna look kind of crazy, and these are crazy needles with crazy yarn. All right, so I tinked back the stitches. It was beautiful. I went to pull my yarn. Can you see what's going on here? My yarn is like totally through the other side. So I'd have to go back and fix those, but I wanted to leave this like this just to show you that it's important to make sure your yarn, if you're doing knit stitches, you're tinking back knit stitches, the yarn is between you and the work. Okay, so otherwise you get this, which could be extremely frustrating depending on how many stitches you have. Okay, next up, okay, purl rows. Purling, so I've created a stockinette sampler here. Again, I'm using big needles, big yarn, just so we can kind of see the stitch definition here. So stockinette, we're knitting one side, we're pulling, knit, purl, knit, purl. For some reason, if you have to take back your purl stitches, which again, your muscle memory is going to want to come into play here. So I'll get started with a few and then I'll show you what we can do if you have a big long series of rows to do. So typically if we're going to tink back a purl stitch, I take my left needle, pop it in, that stitch comes off. And again, this is bulky yarn, so it may be 1 or 2 stitches before I'm going to have to readjust that river. It doesn't want to flow. So what I'm going to do, let me get one started for you. I'm going to pop that in there. So again, I'm popping that in to that stitch below. So I want to take this one off the needle. I don't want to lose my loop. So my needle is going into this stitch over here. I'm going to turn my work over. Now, notice when I said when we had the knit stitches, our yarn was in between us and the work. Purling, because you know, purling is just the opposite of a knit. We're gonna wanna put if we're tinking back purl stitches, we want that yarn away from us. We want that river flowing away from us. Okay, don't tension it up. See, it's just muscle memory, people. You wanna grab that yarn and tension. But no, we're gonna just let it go, and we're gonna go in and grab the stitches same way we did before, from right to left, right to left, right to left. Pop those off. Oh my goodness, look how fast I'm going through these. So we've got, again, I'm trying to get in that loop, that bottom loop. I'm pulling it off. I'm not worrying about tensioning the yarn with my fingers. Oh my goodness, people, look at this. Beautiful. All right, and then just in the interest of time here. Okay, so I'm gonna put this down to, whoops. I don't wanna do that, Lisa. Okay, so again, you can just still take your yarn and just pull it back and wind it back onto your ball. Think of how fast this is gonna be for hats, socks, you know, if you goof something up. So I have, whoops, get back on there. This is a hat I'm currently working on. It is just straight up knit stitches all in the round. I'm using magic loop for this, but I guess this could work on DPNs. Again, let's say I forgot to insert a design element down here. I goofed up, or I have a drop stitch and I need to go back and kind of get to. I could sit and tink back, and this is going to be really tiny, so I don't know how these are going to show, but I just wanted to show you that it can be done in the round as well. So I'll stick that guy in there. I'm going to turn my work around. I'm undoing a knit stitch, so my yarn is coming towards me and getting tangled in my work in the process. So I take that guy off. I'm going to slide in there, and again, this is where nice pointy needles might be helpful with this tiny yarn. Can you guys see that? There we go. And so yeah, you can really make some progress. And of course it's not working because I'm filming. But yeah, you can really make some progress on your projects. And again, I found some yarn is easier to do this than others. Let's see here. Come on, let me just do one more. Okay, this is hard to do when I'm looking at the camera and got the camera set up and work. But again, you can just go back and pull out those stitches. Trust me, it's a lifesaver, it's a time saver. All right. That's all I've got. Good luck. I hope this helps at least one person. If it does, I think I've done my job, because I've learned so much from watching videos online as a self-taught knitter. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. I hope this works for someone. Thanks for watching.